Hey there, hi there, ho there. Welcome to another round of Collection Connection. It's a game I play with my brother, Plastic Eric, who has his very own channel, the Plastic Soundwave Cult. Every Monday, he'll pull out an album from his record collection to talk about. And every Thursday, here on Good Show Ponsonby, I discuss an album from my collection. But there is a delicious twist. While the albums might seem entirely unrelated on the surface, there's actually some fact or quirk that these albums or artists have in common, and we challenge you to work out what that connection is. Eric's mostly vinyl, I'm entirely compact disc, but we are not here to pitch a format war, we just want to share our love of music with you by talking about records. Today we will forge a connection between an album that in 1986 went all the way to number 3 in Sweden, and that is the career resurrecting Blah 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 from Iggy Pop, and from 2012, the album that really cemented its creator as a contemporary music industry darling, Gary Clark Jr.'s Black and Blue. And yes, I can see that both albums coincidentally start with a BLA, but that is not the connection. We have something slightly more fiendish in mind. That'll be coming up in just a minute, but first we need to reveal the connection between the prior pair of albums, those being Blah 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 and Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me from The Cure. They do both have triple repetitions in the title, a fairly obvious connection that was successfully guessed by Zep Pearl, so congratulations to him for that. And though that was technically correct, there was a deeper and more diabolical connection that could have been found, and that is that not only the album titles feature a triple repetition, but each album also contains a song that has a triple repetition. In the case of Iggy Pop, it is the title track, Blah Blah Blah, and in the case of The Cure, it is the single Hot Hot Hot. So nobody got that deeper connection. Would have been fun, but with that out of the way, let's get to the show. Alrighty, so let's see if we can make this quick. Eric showed Iggy Pop's Blah 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 in his last episode, and I know the song Real Wild One, wasn't aware that it was a cover, as he apparently was not, and I like that song from back in the day, and it is possible that if I had been familiar with the album back in the day, it would be granted the grandfather clause that a lot of the music that I love from that era has, that kind of protects it from feeling dated to my ears. But it felt weirdly 80s. It felt like one of those 70s artists making an 80s album. And even though I like Real Wild Child, even the beginning of it, I haven't heard it in quite a while. And the sort of the twin keyboards kind of doing a little humming kind of sound was not very Iggy Pop. Not very rock and roll. And I can't say that it was bad, but it did sound a little try to fit in with the big kids. It didn't feel like it was Iggy Pop doing his thing. So I could see why maybe he doesn't love this album that much. And I only really had a chance to listen through once. We got a lot going on, not least of which is the fact that my brother is somewhere around this house with me right at the very moment. And so I'm trying to whip through this, but yeah, I guess that is Blah 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 from Iggy Pop. As far as a connection goes, I have connected it to, let's hold it upright, Black and Blue from Gary Clark Jr. Similar to the Iggy Pop album, this is one that I actually own. I don't have the Iggy Pop, but it's one I never got terribly familiar with. It was, I think, given to me as part of our local radio station. We were supporters. They're a publicly supported radio station, and we were members at a level in the year 2012 or 2013 when this came out, that they would send a CD every month, and the Gary Clark Jr. was one that was supported by the radio station, and so I got it. I listened to it more than I did some of the things that I got from them were just very sort of not up my alley. And I like the Gary Clark Jr., but it wasn't anything that hit into heavy rotation. I do have another EP. I think subsequently bought another title from him. Each title had one track that really kind of stood out to me, made it onto a playlist that I compiled myself. In the case of Black and Blue, it was a Glitter Ain't Gold, as a song that struck my ear, and the rest of it kind of fell out of my head. I hadn't pulled it out in a number of years, so it was fun to be able to pull it out, and it sounded pretty good. It lacks some degree of hooks, I think, is maybe what didn't keep me coming back all that often, but it is the kind of music that if it was playing overhead in the grocery store or in a restaurant or something like that, it would probably catch my ear and make me go, what is this? This is pretty good. And so in that sense, I think a success, and sounds good, and especially some of the longer jams on here, like When My Train Pulls In, which is the second track, and Third Stone from the Sun / If You Love Me Like You Say, which is the 11th track, are longer jams, kind of groove based, and the groove you really get into is strong. It's really good, but it doesn't end up having a hook. So sonically, I think it's very interesting, and yet it doesn't have a hook that sticks it into my head. So once it's done playing, I forget how it goes. But Gary Clark Jr. is a singer, guitarist from Austin, born in 1984. One of those depressing things. He's a dozen years younger than I am. And in his 20s, not necessarily when he was starting out, because he did have a couple of albums before this and had sort of made a name for himself as a teenager even. This is what really sort of clicked him into place, and all of a sudden he was everywhere, and he was really embraced sort of by the NPR set. He was like literally born to play Austin Lights, if that's the name of the show, whatever that Austin-based performance show was. But instantly he was on stage, sharing the stage with the likes of the Rolling Stones, Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Foo Fighters, and all of a sudden everybody was collaborating with Gary Clark Jr. Kind of as soon as he became part of my consciousness, as soon as I was aware of him, it felt like he was everywhere for a little while. And that kind of faded away again, and it felt like maybe he was a flash in the pan, but it just kind of fell off my radar personally. I don't think he has released a ton of material since, like new material, but it seems like he's been involved in a lot of projects since then. So I think he's keeping busy, and has a new album, newish album at least, called JPEG Raw. It might be really new for all I know. That might be interesting, and maybe if I was listening to the radio more these days, maybe I would be exposed to some of that music. But for what it was, pulling this out, this 2012 album, I can't believe it's already a dozen years old itself. It's like the age difference between me and Gary Clark Jr. It sounded pretty good, and it was really easy to listen to. There was one track, The Life. So he kind of bumps around in different styles, but a lot of it feels very blues based. But it'll get into funkier territory or even kind of countryer territory. But there's one song, The Life, that really feels out of place stylistically. And I talked with Eric a little bit about how it's odd, someone like Queen is all over the map stylistically in their recordings, and you celebrate it. But when this is one particular song that sounds different than every other song, and it sounds like it is trying to be a mainstream pop hit, a little more hip-hop influenced, and just the production technique is different. The guitar is there, I suppose, but not very prominently there. Feels much more like a studio recording, from a modern artist who doesn't necessarily write their own songs or writes their songs along with teams and stuff like that. And their tracks are really created in studio, sort of less from musicians and more from, Pro Tools. So that was a little bit of an odd bird. It still wasn't a terrible song, but it really stuck out to me on the album like a sore thumb. But beyond that, good stuff. Definitely The guitar is sort of Stevie Ray Vaughan-esque, and his singing, I guess more so than his guitar playing, is reminiscent of Jimi Hendrix. So, and he just kind of exudes cool. So you could see why everyone would want to collaborate with him. All of a sudden, when he hit the scene, it's like, oh, you know, you're the guy we've been looking for, who feels cool and yet is new and fresh and yet plays kind of a retro style. And so all these old stalwarts could play with somebody who is up and coming. So it all makes sense to me, I suppose. But it was strange, and it came and went. It felt like a flash in the pan, but I did dig it up in order to make this connection. And the connection is based on the artist and not so much on the particular album. I could have chosen the other one that I have, the EP, but I went with the full album, Black and Blue. And so it's a little bit tricky, and the connection is a lot more overt coming from the Gary Clark side than it is coming from the Iggy Pop side. And it may take a little bit of digging on Iggy Pop to come up with the connection to Gary Clark Jr. But if you have a guess, you can leave that down in the comments. The first right answer will get a shout out in the next video. And if you just want to tell me about your opinion about Iggy Pop, either in the 80s or just Iggy Pop in general, or your impression of Gary Clark Jr.'s work, feel free, have at it. I'm up for discussing the music as well in the comments. And as far as the next episode, as I mentioned, Eric is actually here with me this week. I know he doesn't have an episode in the tank, and he's not going to be home before his next episode is due, so I'm not sure exactly how he intends to get one done, but he says he intends to get one done. But he won't be with his record collection when he does it. But he's been record shopping out with me. Maybe he'll be able to connect it to something that he purchased this very week. And if so, you can look for his response on Monday on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. And in the meantime, that's all I got. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Good show, Ponsonby.